Ladies, gentlemen, and harassment of all ages, early this week we're going to have a stream directly from the developers themselves with a large focus on the next major patch for Diablo 4, the Season 6 mid-season patch. In the build-up to this, the developers have been a bit quiet, trying to save all the real bombshells for the stream itself, and while we will of course talk about the stream and what happens on the channel after the fact, this is your sort of preparation for the stream. We will round up everything that we expect might happen, everything that we hope will happen, and then we'll just go over anything that I've seen cropping up in the community as of late and to the player base as well. First things first, with the stream itself happening on the 12th, predictions are a touch off, as normally these happen on a Wednesday or a Thursday, with the actual patch itself hitting the following Tuesday. Based on all prior patterns though, the most logical time to expect the patch to hit is exactly 1 week after the stream on November 19th. Though with this odd stream timing, it's either because they want to give players a bit of extra time after finding out what's changing and before the patch hits, and this would make sense to me if they're planning to fix the metric ton of spiritborn bugs, because they might just want to give people a bit of an adequate warning to try and swap builds if they'd like to. Or it could be the opposite and the patch hits before the weekend, though I consider that one far less likely. While the patch date will of course be one of the first things confirmed on stream, I think it's reasonable to assume this is ahead of a normal timed patch on the 19th, and the stream is a touch early for the reason that I mentioned before. Outside of that, there are of course the things that we expect to have in the patch. The obvious stuff is balance changes. The only two times that they make proper balance changes are in between seasons or mid-season patches. And with this being the first balance patch since the major expansion release, I would definitely expect to see a healthy amount of changes happening for every class. Yes, bug fixes will nearly be inevitable to happen for Spiritborn because bugs are bugs. We don't know if they'll tackle the full suite of bugs though, or some sort of middle ground to try and keep current Spiritborn players from getting too uppity about it, but I am consistently personally of the opinion that fixing as much as possible as soon as possible is the way to go to make the class fun and functional longer term. That said, again, those are bug fixes. What I'm talking about being likely outside of that are proper balance changes, things like boosting the effectiveness of certain skills and thus making different builds either viable from the start or maybe even shift the meta entirely, as there isn't a single class that would be upset to receive some sort of top-end power boost. Generally, my largest hopes for this is always bringing in the lower-end outlier skills that don't perform well to being more comparable to the top builds, and to try and create more endgame parity within the classes and make more things playable doing harder content so people can have more fun. So that's my general hope. Aside from this, we have expectations of changes coming to things like shrines and how they function, as they are pretty lackluster at the moment. However, the only one actively confirmed to being worked on is Conduit Shrine, and I think this would be a reasonable time to see these Conduit Shrine changes. The problems that with this are pretty much just one of the larger gripes of the community as well, because it's literally reached the point where Conduit Shrine is just a negative to click on for most builds, so hopefully this is when the fixes will come. Past this then, there are some big hopes that Legion events will be returned to being useful again. In the past, these were known as the main farm and source for rawhide and iron chunks. Whenever you were running low, you just ran a Legion event and had a bunch of resources pile in, but this was removed as a feature of that activity, and we're still unsure whether or not this was intentional, but while there has been an effort to make rawhide and iron chunks a less aggressive material bottleneck this season, it still can be a bit of an issue. So personally, I think it just makes sense to give larger amounts from these Legion events once again, especially as the activity is fairly pointless in the current sort of climate of the game without that feature. And this would sort of hit two birds with one stone in that way. Then the next big target that I would like to talk about is the Armory feature, which essentially should in theory function like the wardrobe presets, but for entire builds. Equipment, skill points, paragon, all of that business easily swapped between saved presets in the click of a single button. This has been talked about since launch as a major request from the community, and it being implemented would instantly add a ton of playtime to endgame for a lot of people, as currently there are a lot of players who only ever play one build per season, and the main reason is just how much of a hassle it is to enter a new build. And if you don't end up enjoying the new build, it's almost as much of a hassle to swap back to your original build to begin with. The Armory would free players up from this just big burden, and the result would be a positive for players and for the devs, as they're always looking for ways to increase player retention and playtime over a season 2, and this seems like a really easy way to do that to me. This is a feature that we were told would finally be coming soon after the expansion release, to quote it, sort of paraphrase it, not with the expansion itself, but soon after. And while a lot of people may have forgotten that sort of offhanded comment from the devs, I have not. And so I would say that we're pretty 50-50, either getting this feature next season, hopefully, which honestly seems the most likely to me, or maybe it'll even be the big surprise of the mid-season patch for Season 6, especially if we are talking about fixing up Spiritborn and trying to incentivize people to try out things that maybe aren't Quill Volley. I can't think of a better pairing, but that's entirely dependent on how how development has gone on this very big feature. So I'm hopeful, but I wouldn't say overly expecting for this one to happen mid-season. Past this, most of my expectations are just the regular suite of bug fixes to various parts of the game, perhaps some rebalancing to the new activities, or fixes or changes to the rewards, as both Undercity and Dark Citadel have been pretty large topics in various parts of them too. Outside of this, there's a couple of topics in the community that are worth bringing some attention to as well, the first being the way that gold and trading as concepts have sort of become dominant for top-end players, not even just like the very top end, but anyone who wants to do meaningful things compared to what their class is capable of. To phrase it a bit more simply, if you see someone doing a tier 150 pit run in a spiritborn build, and you copy their concept of a build as best as you can and top out below 150, the main difference is gear. The reason is equipment, and not having 2 or more ideal greater affixes on every one of your pieces. This has become even more exacerbated this season with the change to legendary aspects where the top rolls only come on ancestral items, but their drop rates have been absolutely abysmal. So you have lots of players, including myself, running around in builds that they've been working towards since the start of the season, and chances are you have at least one meaningful legendary aspect in your build that still isn't maximum rolled more than a month into the season. The reason the top players do have these things and most people don't is because of trading, whether through real money trading, which is a thing that exists and is thoroughly against terms of service, or just by proper in-game trading with gold, slowly exchanging valuable drops for gold that can then be traded for even more valuable drops later on. This is how the best gear is farmed. It's not in-game, it's through the trade system. This is how runes are generally acquired for crafting mythic uniques as well for a lot of people, and it has just sort of become a very big spread in the player base where there is a clear and massive power difference between those who understand trading and use it properly and those who prefer not to engage with it, especially on the point about mythic uniques. Personally, I've been saying this for a bit, but the new mythic unique craft system is pretty bad compared to the old one, at least as the only option. My ideal version would be to have this new crafting option still exist for 2 sparks and a bunch of runes because it is useful, but then also give players the actual choice of the old one that used to exist at the Alchemist, where you can just trade 4 sparks for a mythic of your choice with 50 million gold. The beauty of that is it's a relatively easy change for them to make if they want to, as it was already a feature before, and so if they want to do something like this, it would be very possible for them to have it as part of a mid-season patch like the one that's coming up. As for the rest of the issues with trading, that's much harder to control. The prices of items, their value in gold is decided by how much people are willing to pay for it, supply and demand and all of that stuff. And with gold farming bots existing and real money trading existing, it's a hard thing to sort of rein in for the developers themselves. I don't know how much can or should be done about this in the middle of a season, but I definitely hope to see the devs continue to try and tackle this issue in future seasons, as it just sort of completely brings the wind out of the sails when you realize why these things are the way they are. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Your wrap up of everything important, everything that may be relevant to the mid-season patch coming up, and just some other desires from the player base leading up to this patch as well, and the dev stream that is happening for it relatively soon. Make sure you let us know your own thoughts on all this down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.